Welcome to Arms and happy birthday, dear NATO. Good afternoon, this is Henry Keane in UATV studio, explaining hard things in easy terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. The North Atlantic Alliance is 74 years old today. As of today, there are 31 countries in this military political union. Finland has joined the bloc just recently, and we hope that soon NATO will expand in even further to the east and that Ukraine will take a worthy place in it. For Ukraine, membership in the North Atlantic Alliance is one of the key goals of foreign policy because NATO has become the basis of a unified Euro-Atlantic security system from Canada to the Baltic states. Our history with the alliance began in 1997 when the NATO Information and Documentation Center was created in Ukraine. At the Madrid summit, the president of Ukraine, Leonid Kuchma, signed the Ukraine-NATO Charter, and the mission of Ukraine of NATO was opened at the headquarters of the alliance. In June 2020, Ukraine received the status of a partner with enhanced capabilities of NATO. Although, in general, our state's cooperation with the alliance has been ongoing since the 90s. Joint military exercises, rehabilitation of Ukrainian military personnel abroad, implementation of NATO standards in the security and defense sector of Ukraine. After the Russian Federation's large-scale invasion of Ukraine on February 24, 2022, NATO radically revised its security strategy. In the new strategic concept of the alliance approved at the summit in Madrid in June 2022, Russia was called the main security threat to the Euro-Atlantic region. However, what is really important is that the meeting of the Ukraine-NATO Commission at the level of foreign ministers is taking place for the first time in 6 years.
It must be a big day at NATO if all of you are here. Not only is it the birthday of the Washington Treaty, but also a big day for Finland, and we sincerely congratulate our Finnish friends with the accession. Ukraine is aiming at reaching the same goal, becoming a full member of NATO, and it will be one of the topics of our conversations here in Brussels of how can we move forward. NATO and Ukraine need each other. As simple as that. And while we appreciate the practical support we receive from the alliance, there is no better strategic solution to ensuring strategic security in the Euro-Atlantic region than the membership of Ukraine in the alliance.
The minister also noted that he welcomes the discussion of strategic plans to ensure sustainable support for Ukraine. One of the important issues that will be raised today will be Ukraine's accession to NATO. The accession of Finland is a clear signal that it is time to rethink all strategies and all ideas in general and in particular. There is no better solution for ensuring Euro-Atlantic security as a whole than Ukraine's membership. At the same time, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg noted that bravery, courage and determination the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as the Ukrainian people and political leadership, is unbelievable. He welcomed the supply of heavy armored vehicles and modern battle tanks by allied countries to Kiev. According to the General Secretary, he expects that during the meeting, the ministers will discuss how to provide military, economic and financial assistance to Ukraine in the future. And in order for Ukraine to become a member of the alliance, it must win the war waged against it by Russia. According to him, NATO's position remains unchanged. Ukraine will become a member of the alliance, but for now, it is more important to restore its territorial integrity.
NATO's position remains unchanged. Ukraine will become a member of the alliance. At the same time, we must all understand that the main focus now is to ensure that Ukraine wins as a sovereign independent state in Europe. Without Ukraine winning as an independent state, the whole question of membership will not have significance. Therefore, the first step in the direction of any relation between Ukraine and NATO is to guarantee that Ukraine will win. Jens Stoltenberg, Secretary General of NATO.
We do expect that the Allies will develop a multi-year aid program for Ukraine, which will demonstrate long-term commitment to our country. After all, with our struggle against the Russian occupiers' courage and professionalism, the armed forces of Ukraine confirm that Ukraine is already a de facto member of NATO, literally spilling our blood for European and democratic values. The North Atlantic Alliance is a structure that cultivates the true values of democracy, individual freedom and the rule of law, and the peaceful resolution of disputes, and supports the values throughout the Euro-Atlantic region. The main military political principle of the organization, a system of collective security and response to an attack from outside, was and remains a zone of confidence, thanks to which NATO is expanding even today. Civilized countries, due to Russian aggression, understand now that only membership in North Atlantic Alliance can guarantee a peaceful and safe life for their citizens. Ukraine is not an exception. However, the historical circumstances are such that our path to NATO was paved, unfortunately, through a brutal and bloody war unleashed by Russia. Today, NATO helps us to go through this difficult path to preserve the freedom, sovereignty and independence of Ukraine. The Ukrainian people highly appreciate NATO's support and sincerely congratulate the alliance on its anniversary. A forward first. When Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine a year ago, it triggered many things. National mobilization, international outrage, and once-in-a-generation migration crisis. It also revealed the Ukrainian military's slow-burn transformation from a Soviet army to a NATO-style outfit able to outfight, outfox, and out-equip its Russian foes. After Russia's first invasion in 2014, and it was 2014 in Donbas region and then Crimea, and what happened after in 24 February 2022 was rather the consequence. And all along during the war, up to this very wrap-up and onwards to our inevitable victory, Ukraine revamped it all. Its military organization and doctrine, allowing our army to eventually get to grips with Russian occupiers. The Ukrainian military back then had been deliberately hollowed out by a series of leaders including Yanukovych, who had abandoned a lavish state-bought mansion in the Kyiv suburbs as protesters seized control of Ukrainian capital in February 2014, and as the Kremlin ordered troops onto the Crimean Peninsula. But the lack of supplies wasn't the only thing hampering our forces. There was also a lack of initiative. Western militaries may be led by high-ranking officers such as colonels and generals, but since the Cold War, the United States, for example, has also trained non-commissioned officers such as sergeant and even enlisted troops to make tactical decisions on their own in the thick of combat. That style of warfighting was inspired by the 19th and 20th century German army's delegation of decision-making ever downward and stands in sharp contrast to the rigid top-down style that still prevails in the Russian military. At that time, a generational shift that would transform Ukraine's military had begun. Soviet-era officers were aging out of the force, and the organizational structure that had characterized the Ukrainian military since independence began to resemble something that might be more familiar to NATO standards. Unlike the Soviet-era military districts, which gave a small handful of geographic commanders vast control over the military, now Ukrainian army would have operational posts for north, south, east and west akin to US combatant commands that originated in the 1980s. Then, in March 2020, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky makes the decision to split the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian armed forces from its existing general staff. It was an effort to encode NATO's mission command style of delegating into the military's DNA. Zelensky promoted General Valery Zaluzhny from the two-star post of Operational Command North all the way up to the newly created Commander-in-Chief position. The move sends shockwaves through the ranks. No one had ever been promoted from so low on the pecking order to the military top job. Zaluzhny and his post-independence cohort also initiated a widespread purge of Ukrainian military officers seen as pro-Russian. The United States and NATO countries championed contracts for English language training for reform-minded officers, but Ukraine got geared up with partners. In almost a year into the full-scale Russian invasion of our country, the Ukrainian military was still burning through ammunition, especially artillery shells, at a historic rate. But every Ukrainian is their own auto mechanic, and the average untrained soldier is better schooled in stealth tactics than most Americans are. Ukrainian's military build-up has swallowed up some of the country's top tech brains. Before the United States began sending NATO-grade artillery pieces in the spring, Ukrainian troops refashioned old Polish and Soviet-era tanks to fire mortars and used cheap Chinese drones to target indirect fires. You didn't know it, but when US-made M777 howitzer cannons finally arrived, They were stripped of firing software and fire control systems under US arms export control rules. Our troops developed their own software as a replacement. At Hostomel and in other Kyiv suburbs, commanders resorted to YouTube videos to learn how to fire javelins and Stinger missiles to fend off the aerial assaults. And the units that were lucky to have javelins sometimes conserved their rounds, keeping the Russians at bay with weaker mortar systems. From today's point of view, during more than 13 months of war against one of the world's largest armies, Ukraine's military has continually stood out for one quality in particular: our ability to adapt. Over and over, our army has nimbly responded to changing battlefield dynamics and exploited emerging technologies to capitalize on Russia's mistakes. Despite obvious limited experience with the advanced weapons technologies, our soldiers quickly graduated from point-and-shoot Javelin and Stingers missile systems to the more sophisticated high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS, which we have used to pummel Russian command centers, logistical assets, and ammunition depots. We have deployed military and commercial drones in increasingly creative ways. And although this is not the first war to play out on social media, without any false modesty, the Ukrainians have been giving the world a masterclass in effective information operations in the digital age. Such is their record of technical and tactical versatility that Ukrainian forces continue to enjoy a sense of momentum, despite the fact that the front lines have been largely frozen for months. By contrast, Russian forces have shown limited openness to new tactics or new technologies. Hobbled by bad leadership and terrible morale, the Russian military was and remains slow to recover from its disastrous attempt to seize Kyiv in February 2022, and is struggling to adjust its strategy or learn from its own mistakes. The Kremlin's core strategy continues to rely largely on throwing more manpower and firepower at the enemy, a lumbering, high-cost approach that has hardly inspired confidence. Observing this performance, some Western experts have raised the possibility of exceedingly dire scenarios, including a doomed Russian spring offensive, a large-scale mutiny of troops, or even the collapse of Russian President Vladimir Putin's regime.
The Ukrainians are absolutely astounding at learning new systems very quickly and putting them to good use, and even modifying them for uses that go beyond what we thought they were capable of. And that's one of the things that I think makes it so valuable for American equipment to be in Ukraine. The Ukrainians are also inventing a whole new way of war. And this is something that will absolutely, if the United States takes advantage of it, it will absolutely change the tactics, techniques, and procedures that the United States uses in battle.
Today, things are different. No, my bad. Not just different. No, it is a wrong, weak term. Things are different things these days. We have Leopard tanks. We have radio intelligence systems. We have you name it. We still need more artillery and military equipment because it is never enough on the battlefield. But there's one thing we never lacked back in the day and today. It is the holy trinity of every victory: morale, patriotism, and a lack of bad choice. We simply cannot afford to lose. So, we will win. Glory to Ukraine. It was Henry Keane on UATV channel, bringing the hardest of things in the simplest of terms for the whole free world directly from Ukraine. Just by the way, it is our 100th wrap-up today. Not as mature as NATO, however. Happy anniversary to us and our gorgeous team of Freedom and UATV channels. Stay safe and tune to us for more. See you tomorrow.